Shamanic journeying found me. I got into it because I took a workshop and I just took to it like a fish to water. And as soon as I learned the form, which is very simple, I was able to do it on my own like anyone can. Shamanic journeying doesn't make you a shaman, it makes you a human, because every human has the capacity to engage in a shamanic journey. I'm Brandon Alter. I am a teacher, a healer, a reader, and a performer who is working out of Los Angeles. So my healing practice is sharing the different spiritual skills that have helped me on my own healing journey. And I only share really those things that I have firsthand experience with. And at the end of the day, I don't do a lot. I hold space and I facilitate an environment where you can reconnect with your own healing powers and just allowing what wants to come through. Even sometimes I'll be like wondering, is something happening? Is anything happening here? And always, without fail, client is always like, oh, you won't believe what happened, or this was so powerful. It doesn't always have to be like fireworks and deep emotional catharsis. Sometimes that's great, but other times it's very peaceful, grounding, blissful, so you can connect with your guide so that you can realize there is so much more than just this physical reality. So shamanic journeying is what I consider a spirit-guided meditation. So it's an altered state, and as human beings, we're wired for altered states. I always joke and say, like, when you've been scrolling your Instagram feed for 20 minutes and you get all hazy, that's an altered state. When you zone out during traffic, that's an altered state. So shamanic journeying is using altered states to connect with spirit and to receive guidance, healing, or information to questions that you may have. And the simplest way to think about it is it's almost like a lucid dream that you willingly take. And it's an ancient practice. The practice of shamanic journeying was used by indigenous peoples really for survival. When is the drought gonna end? Where should we be hunting for food? Do we need to move our settlements? But now, because a lot of our survival needs have been met, we use journeying to be able to dig into our lives more deeply. So my first journey experience when I took this workshop was to travel to the lower world and to connect with a helping spirit. And a helping spirit is a consistent pattern of energy that wants to work with you. You can think of it like a spirit guide, and we all have many different guides, but really they're just energy, but they take forms to help us understand what that energy is. So sometimes they take the form of animals or colors or any sort of element, trees, fire, wind, ancestors. And so my first journey was to connect me with my very first helping spirit, who is Camel. And I remember that it wasn't what I was expecting or hoping for. You know, everyone's always hoping for like panther or bobcat or, you know, and I was like, camel, but it made perfect sense, because when I think about camel, I think about a long journey through the desert. I'm also a total desert junkie, and it was really the beginning of my spiritual awakening as an adult. I do believe that anyone can journey. The biggest obstacle to journeying is really just making a deal with your mind to stay on track with you. How you get into that altered state, because there's many different ways to do it. And of course, one way that everyone knows about is plant medicine. And in a lot of ways, like when you take mushrooms or you take ayahuasca or psilocybin, that is a journey, whether or not you're aware of it. But there are other ways to do it. And the drum is great because, you know, you can have a journey that takes 15, 20 minutes, and then you can get back to the rest of your day. But I have also found that the type of breath work that I teach and also practice is a great way to shift into that altered state. I would describe breath work as a really powerful way to put yourself back into the river of spirit. There are lots of different forms of breath work. I also teach yoga, so I'm familiar with lots of different forms of pranayama. But the breath work that I find most powerful and most effective is what's called two-part pranayama. You breathe solely through the mouth, which bypasses the ego. When you breathe through the nose, you can kind of control and hold on and manipulate. When you breathe through the mouth, you can't. And you're kind of at the will of spirit to take you where you need to go. I also think you can consider it like you're plugging yourself into the electrical socket of spirit. You're plugging yourself back into that original place from which we all came from. And so any sort of imbalances, any sort of energy blockage, any sort of like human shame, sadness, despair, anger, grief starts to get released through the breath, which is just energy, which is just space. So that's really what the breath work does, is it's moving energy and space through all of your bodies, your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual body. The divine speaks to me in many different ways, and it changes constantly. I listen a lot.
I think I hear some crows.
There's one. It's about to fly right over your head. Good morning, brother. The kind of aha moment for me in learning how to listen to messages is that I always thought it was going to be somebody else's voice. And I realized it's my voice. But it comes through the back of my head, or sometimes through my left ear, the natural world. So paying attention to the wind, birds, plants and trees. I find that when I'm having a conversation and something like really important has been said, then the wind all of a sudden picks up. I think it's important for us to remember that we are as bound by natural laws as any other natural creation. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important for me to spend time in nature, to return to nature, and why shamanic practice is so important for me. The simplest way I define shamanism is just the idea that everything has a spirit. When I go to a new place, I want to exchange with those spirits of the land. I want them to know that I acknowledge them, that I see them. And that's the thing about nature, is as soon as you start to let it know that you're seeing it, it wants to show off for you. It loves that you notice it, you know? I always think like when I'm walking through the desert, I'm walking through a part of myself. When I'm walking through the forest, I'm walking through another part of myself. The external landscapes mirror these internal landscapes.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like love and relationships.
You want to know about love and relationships?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what I want you to do is to hold the cards so they can get to know you. I think in the past, a lot of women have sought me out because they're seeking a gentle male presence. Because a lot of women and gay men have been wounded by men who are aggressively masculine. And I certainly believe there are many different ways to embody gendered archetypes. And I just happen to be a man, but a gentle man, and a safe place to go to kind of heal that. But as I come more and more into my queerness, I am really wanting to work with my own community, and that is a broad community: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, asexual, intersex, it goes on and on, questioning, allied, but also people of color, marginalized communities, because I feel like in a lot of ways the world is built for white people, particularly straight white people, and unfortunately most of the healing is kind of catered to those people when it's really the people of color and the LGBTQ community that need healing the most. And so I want to be able to offer that, and I feel like the most important thing for me, even though I'm a total esoteric weirdo, is to make these things really accessible.
Hey girl, hey! Welcome back to another episode of The Spiritual Gayz!
My husband and I have a podcast called The Spiritual Gayz, G-A-Y-Z, and it is an offering that's dedicated to exploring the wide reaches of spirituality without pretending that it all makes sense. It's our little container to wax philosophical, to check in, and to share in like a super chill, hey girl sort of way, the things that mean a lot to us. To give people access to these languages of astrology, tarot, shamanic practice, because these are gifts and tools and they should be accessible to everybody. My desire to work with the LGBTQ community is stemming from my own revelation and realization that there is just so much unhealed shame in all of us. Because we were raised, even if our parents knew that we were gay and tried to do the best for us, they were still raising us within this heteronormative landscape. And so as sensitive beings, which I think a lot of us are, we realized that there were parts of ourselves, unconsciously, we realized there were these parts of ourselves that were liabilities, and we had to amputate them in order to survive. And even as a man who's married and in a beautifully healing relationship and who is creative and artistic and weird as fuck, I'm still realizing how much shame is still inside me. And if it's still inside me, it's inside everybody. And we have to start to address this and figure out where it is and start to release it so that we can have access to more of ourselves. And so that's really where I want to be offering my gifts. But I also think queerness isn't limited to your sexuality. Everyone has the opportunity to be queer. And I actually think like even straight white men have a lot of shame because they think they're supposed to be a certain way. And if they could have access to their queerness, even like, I'm sure there's some straight white men that would love to paint their fucking nails, you know? And if they could just have access to that, if they could just express their individuality in a way that they didn't have to judge themselves, I think we'd be living in a world that would be a lot more interesting and a lot closer to the fullness of what the divine wants to express on this human plane. My big soapbox is that your biological gender does not prohibit you from experiencing divine feminine and sacred masculine energies, right? The body is a beautiful and sacred container for things that defy that sort of codification. It's important for all of us to work with our opposites. And even in yoga, we talk about healing with opposites. You have to know what pain is in order to know what pleasure is. You have to experience sadness in order to know joy. You have to contract in order to expand. So I think, again, healers learn to heal themselves, and then through learning that, they're able to teach others how to do the same thing. You have to walk through the wound. You can't get hung up in the wound. You can't be working your wound. You can't keep fingering your wound, and you can't use your wound as an excuse. You can't use your brokenness as an excuse to behave badly in the world, and there is a lot of that. That is your portal into your expansion. Your wounds are a portal into your expansion. The degree to which I can lay on the bathroom floor and sob my fucking guts out is the same degree to which I can experience ecstasy. You can't have it any other way. Brandonna Summer is many things. She is the Empress of Self-Empowerment. She is an incredibly confident and tremendously broken spirit that has been with me since I was born. And only in the safety of my relationship with my husband did I really feel free to start to explore who and what she is and the work that she wants to do here in the world. And while I work with her, there is something very ephemeral and quite mystical about what happens when she comes to town. And some of it is planned, but again, like healing work, all I really do is hold the space and then allow what she wants to do and what she wants to say to happen. I'm sure she'll be able to tell you a lot more about her. She loves to talk about herself. It's hard for me to talk about her because in the same way that a lot of our mystical experiences defy language, Brandonna Summer defies language in a lot of ways.
You know, feeling free is the one thing that money can't buy. Being at peace in nature, you can't buy that. Of course you can buy land. I own this. But you can't buy the way that you feel when you're wandering the desert at sunset, free as a bird. I wish that for all of you. But I wish it for me the most. Oh, what am I talking about? I already have it.
She is a channeled character. This feels a little bit like semantics, but Brandonna Summer is her own person. She's a spirit that comes through, and she has her own birth chart separate from mine. She has her own history, her own upbringing that's different from mine. Part of it is my own creative way to heal some of my own trauma. I have a beautiful family, but also a challenging family, as we all do, and it's a creative way for me to kind of heal that. But then there are things that come through her that would never come through me.
People really come to see me just to see me. You know, beauty is healing. That's why we love to look at sunsets, because something in just seeing something beautiful heals something inside of ourselves. So a lot of my clients just come because they want to see how beautiful I am. And I remind them, the beauty you see in me is actually getting you in touch with a beauty inside of you. The wind agrees.
So Brandonna is really healing for me because she's another way to explore the merging of divine feminine and sacred masculine. Of course, just me as I am, as a effeminate gay man in the world, I have masculine and feminine attributes, and it merges. And Brandana, also as a Leo, has a masculinity and a femininity to her as well. It's just a different way to explore. It's like opposite sides of the same coin.
I'm also an impeccable judge of character. Well, except for my ex-boyfriend and the one before that. You know, I'm an impeccable judge of character if I don't want to have sex with you. Isn't that true for everyone?
And it's healing because she's able to allow me to expand into my edges. She's able to shake up energy in me. You know, I talked about breathwork as like this great wind that kind of clears the body of blockages, and she too is this great wind that moves through me and clears blockages, you know? Like, as soon as I'm done taking the makeup off and getting out of my clothes, it's like there's this tremendous amount of space that I feel in my body having let her enter into me.
I think it all comes down to love, really, because when you love yourself, you're able to love others. When you're able to accept yourself, you're able to accept others. You only get one chance in this lifetime to be who you are, so you better be it to the hilt.
And the other important thing that Brandana Summer teaches me is how to have fun and how not to take things too seriously. There's a tendency for healers and spiritual seekers and certainly air signs to get really serious. And we gotta have fun, we gotta play. The heart wants to play. We gotta be more like children. We gotta be more like nature. Nature knows how to play, you know? Like, nature doesn't get that serious.
Never take yourself too seriously, because that's my job.
These days, more often than not, my life philosophy is like, follow your heart. Like, your heart is the wisest teacher you have. As far as I'm concerned, you have one job, and your job is to be you as fully as possible. And that's hard because there is nobody like you and there will never be anybody like you. And that's why I keep saying, like, expand into your edges, because that's your job, is to be you as fully as possible. And that's what healing is removing the obstacles to being you as fully as possible, the judgment and the shame. And so I really just want to be here on this planet for as long as I get to be here on this planet, to encourage people, to help people to be themselves as fully as possible, and to stop apologizing for their authenticity, to stop apologizing for who they are. How can I be more me? And that's a question I ask my heart, you know? Like, how can I be more me?